My name is Rebecca Thompson. I was 37 at the time, living just outside Detroit, Michigan. I was standing in my parents' doorway on Christmas Eve, holding a foil-covered tray of homemade green bean casserole still warm from the oven when my dad leaned in and said, "We don't want your husband and daughter coming tonight. They don't fit in with Valerie's kids," behind me. Ava bounced on her toes, clutching the little bag of handmade ornaments she'd spent days making for everyone. Her smile faded the second those words landed. Not a tantrum, just that quiet dimming like someone turned down the light inside her. I looked straight at my dad, the man I'd spent years trying to keep happy, and said calm as I could, "Then I'm not coming either." My mom stood in the hallway behind him, arms crossed, already looking annoyed. I didn't wait for an argument. I took Ava's hand, grabbed her overnight bag, and walked back out into the snow. By the time I buckled her into the car, my phone buzzed. A text from Valerie. "Good. More food for us." I sat there staring at the screen until it went dark. 3 months later, we started the process of buying a beachfront home and they weren't invited to the housewarming. Snorts, if you want to hear how I cut them off completely and built the family I actually deserved, stay till the end and subscribe so you don't miss what happened next. I was living just outside Detroit with my husband and daughter. I worked as a real estate agent, hustling through the city's endless suburbs and neighborhoods, helping folks find their dream homes, or at least a place that felt right. The job demanded long hours, staging empty houses with fresh flowers and neutral throws to make them look lived in, hosting open houses where I'd chat up potential buyers over coffee, and negotiating contracts late into the night when everyone's tired but determined. It paid the bills for our cozy 3-bedroom townhouse and let me tuck a bit away for Ava's future, but it was exhausting in the best way, building something solid from scratch after some lean years early on. That's exactly how I met my husband, Nathan, a plumber with calloused hands and the kind of quiet warmth that draws you in without trying. He arrived one crisp afternoon to fix a stubborn leak under the sink at a mid-century ranch I was prepping for a high-end listing. Tools clanging softly as he unpacked his bag, he got right to work, sleeves rolled up, explaining to me in simple terms what went wrong without making me feel dumb for not knowing. I lingered in the kitchen, offering him water and asking about his day. And he answered with this easy smile, sharing how he loved solving problems that let families get back to normal life. No boasting, just real talk that made the room feel lighter. From there, our paths crossed more often. He'd get dispatched to other properties I managed. A burst pipe in a colonial revival, a clogged drain in a fixer-upper, and I'd make sure to be on site bringing donuts or just shooting the breeze while he finished up. He, Snorts, started teasing me gently about always being around. And one evening after he'd wrapped up early, he wiped his hands on a rag and asked if I'd let him take me to dinner. No strings, just to see if we clicked outside work calls. My heart skipped. I said yes, and that was it. We fell into a rhythm that felt effortless from the start. Early dates were low-key. Burgers at a drive-in near the river, evening drives, listening to classic rock on the radio, him showing me his favorite spots around town where the Detroit skyline glittered at dusk. He opened up slowly about growing up in a big family of tradespeople, how plumbing gave him steady pride without the office politics I dealt with daily. I told him about the grind of commissions and bad months, and he'd listen. Really listen, squeezing my hand like he got it deep down. There was no rush, no drama. It was the kind of love that sneaks up and settles in your bones. A year later, we married in a backyard gathering under string lights, surrounded by a handful of close friends and both of our families exchanging rings and promises that came straight from the heart. 2 years after that, Ava arrived, our little miracle with Nathan's eyes and my stubborn streak. The moment the nurse placed her in my arms, slick and crying, Nathan leaned over, tears streaming down his face as he kissed her forehead, whispering she'd changed everything for the better. He was there for every milestone, first steps wobbling toward him in the living room. Bedtime stories read with voices for all the characters, school drop-offs where he'd wave until she was inside. Watching them together melted me every time. He made fatherhood look like the most natural thing in the world. Our first visit to my in-laws Deborah and Gregory came a few months after Ava's first birthday. And I admit I felt a knot of worry driving over in the minivan loaded with diapers and toys. Their home was the picture of lived-in comfort. Worn leather couches, shelves of Nathan's childhood photos, a kitchen island piled with fresh-baked cookies. Deborah enveloped me in a hug that smelled like vanilla and home, then lifted Ava high, cooing. "Oh, grandbaby, look at you." As tears welled in her eyes, cradling her close like she'd been dreaming of this day. Gregory clapped Nathan on the back, then dropped to the carpet with exaggerated groans, pulling faces and rattling keys, until Ava's laughter echoed through the house, the two of them tumbling in a pile of blocks by dinner time. They peppered us with questions about the baby routines and my latest closing, sharing stories from raising Nathan without a hint of judgment. As the sun dipped low, Ava dozed against Gregory's chest during dessert, and Deborah slipped me her famous lasagna recipe with a wink, promising monthly playdates. Driving home that night, clear as throat, Nathan's hand in mine, I realized we'd found the kind of family acceptance that sticks forever. From the day I married Nathan, my parents never hid their disapproval. It started small, the way these things often do, with little comments slipped into conversations whenever we visited their place in the city. My dad would look Nathan up and down in his work clothes after a long day and say something like, "Still fixing pipes, huh?" With that tone that made it clear he thought there were better ways to make a living. My mom would nod along, adding how some of her friends' sons had moved into management or started their own businesses, as if that was the only measure of success. They never outright attacked him to his face, but the disappointment hung in the air every time, thick enough that even Nathan, who brushed off most things, started finding excuses to skip some family dinners. When my sister Valerie Thompson, who was 40 at the time, brought her kids over for holidays or birthdays, the difference became impossible to ignore. Valerie's children got the spotlight. New gadgets, expensive outfits, stories about their private lessons, or upcoming vacations proudly shared around the table. Ava, on the other hand, would get simpler gifts, the kind picked up last minute, and my parents barely asked about her day-to-day milestones the way they did with their other grandchildren. It hurt watching Ava hand over her carefully drawn cards or little crafts, only to receive polite thanks that felt forced. The comments aimed at Ava stung the deepest. My mom had this habit of studying her face during family photos and saying things like, "She takes after her dad so much, doesn't she?" With a laugh that wasn't really funny, implying it wasn't a compliment. Or, my dad would watch Nathan helping with something around the house and mutter under his breath about how Ava was picking up those habits already. Over the years, those offhand remarks piled up, making Ava quieter during visits, clinging to my leg more than playing with her cousins. I tried brushing it off at first, telling myself it was generational, that they'd come around once they saw how happy we were, but the pattern never changed. Valerie fed into it, too, comparing her kids' achievements to Ava's in casual ways that felt anything but casual. She'd talk about ballet recital or honor roll certificates for her children, then glance at Ava and ask what she was up to in school, as if expecting less. Family gatherings turned into subtle competitions where Nathan's steady job providing for us got dismissed as just manual labor, while Valerie's husband, with his office position, earned nods of approval. I started limiting how much we shared about our life, protecting what we had built. But the distance grew anyway. In contrast, Deborah and Gregory made every moment with Ava feel special and effortless. They invited her for weekend sleepovers at their house, turning ordinary Saturdays into adventures with homemade pancakes and board games that lasted until bedtime. Gregory loved taking her fishing during the warmer months, patiently teaching her to cast the line on quiet lakes outside town, celebrating every small catch like it was the biggest prize. Other times, he'd scoop up tickets for local baseball games, just the two of them in the stands, sharing hot dogs and cheering through innings, building memories that Ava talked about for weeks afterward. Deborah joined in with baking sessions or trips to the park, listening to Ava's stories with full attention, making her feel truly seen and valued in ways that filled the gaps left by my side of the family. Those differences weighed on me more as Ava grew older and started noticing the uneven treatment herself. She'd come home from a visit to my parents, asking why Grandma and Grandpa didn't seem as excited about her drawings as they were about her cousins. Explaining it without hurting her became harder, and a quiet resentment built inside me toward the people who were supposed to love us unconditionally. Nathan stayed supportive, reminding me we couldn't force their acceptance. But the strain affected all of us in small ways. Fewer invitations accepted, shorter visits, holidays planned around just our little unit, plus his parents. Looking back, those years of subtle rejection laid the foundation for what eventually broke, teaching me early that love shouldn't come with constant judgment attached. Over the years, I had become the main financial support for my family. It started innocently enough back when Nathan and I were just getting on our feet after Ava was born and my real estate commissions were finally steady. My parents called one evening saying they'd racked up credit card debt from unexpected medical bills and home repairs, asking if I could help cover a couple thousand to avoid high interest. I transferred the money without hesitation, feeling good about easing their stress the way families are supposed to look out for each other. A few months later, the same thing happened again. Another round of bills they couldn't manage on fixed retirement income, and I sent $3,000 more, telling myself it was temporary until they got back on track. Then Valerie needed help replacing her old minivan after it broke down completely, leaving her stranded with the kids and no reliable way to get them to school or activities. She explained how a used SUV would make everything easier. And since my closings had been strong that quarter, I covered most of the cost, around $8,000, for a decent model that would last. She promised to pay me back in installments, but those payments never really materialized, turning into excuses about unexpected expenses on her end. I let it slide, not wanting to create tension, especially when Ava loved playing with her cousins during those visits. The requests kept coming in smaller but more frequent ways. My mom would mention the grandchildren's extracurriculars getting pricier, piano lessons, soccer camps, tutoring, and hint that Valerie was struggling to keep up with the fees alone. I'd end up wiring a few hundred here and there for those, or directly paying the daycare center when Valerie fell behind on monthly bills for after-school care. Over time, it added up to thousands every year. Money that came straight from bonuses I'd earned working weekends or late evenings while Nathan handled bedtime routines with Ava. To make things easier during what they called emergencies, I opened a joint checking account with my mom, depositing $10,000 as a cushion she could access quickly without asking each time. The idea was for real crisis, a sudden car repair or medical deductible. But the withdrawals started happening for everyday things like new clothes during sales, dinners out with friends, or home decor updates they wanted. I'd get alerts for $400 at a department store or $600 for a weekend getaway. And when I gently brought it up, my mom would brush it off as necessary to keep life comfortable in retirement. At first, I justified it all as the price of keeping peace and staying close, especially since the emotional distance was already growing from their attitudes toward Nathan. Snorts, sending money felt like the one language they still responded to positively, with thank you calls and invitations to family events that otherwise might not come. But as Ava got older and our own expenses rose, saving for her college fund, home improvements, a reliable second car, I began noticing how one-sided it had become. Nathan pointed it out carefully one night after another transfer, saying we were stretching ourselves thin for people who didn't show the same effort in return. And deep down, I knew he was right. The realization settled in slowly, a quiet ache, that this support wasn't building stronger bonds, but enabling the same patterns to continue without consequence. I'd lie awake sometimes calculating how much we'd given over the years, easily tens of thousands, snorts, and wonder if it had ever truly been appreciated beyond the convenience. It wasn't about the money itself anymore. It was the growing sense that my role, clear's throat, in their lives had shrunk to provider, while the respect and warmth I craved stayed just out of reach. Christmas Eve arrived in the bone-chilling cold of Detroit streets blanketed in white snow. We spent the afternoon getting ready at home, wrapping the last gifts and finishing the casserole I'd made from scratch, while Ava carefully packed her handmade ornaments into a special bag. She had worked on them for weeks. Painted wooden stars, glittery snowflakes, even a little reindeer with button eyes, beaming every time she showed me one and talking about who would get which. Nathan helped load everything into the car, brushing snow off the windshield as Ava climbed in, already buzzing with questions about whether her cousins would play games with her after dinner. The drive felt familiar, yet tense headlights cutting through falling flurries as we navigated the quiet suburban roads lined with glowing decorations. Ava sang along to carols on the radio from the back seat, her voice filling the space with innocent joy that made my chest tighten a little, knowing how much she looked forward to these gatherings despite the undercurrents I'd tried to shield her from. Nathan reached over to squeeze my hand occasionally, sensing my quiet nerves reminding me without words that we were in this together. When we arrived, the house was warmly lit, smoke curling from the chimney, cars already parked along the curb, signaling everyone else was inside. Ava hopped out eagerly, bag swinging as she hurried ahead while Nathan and I carried the food. The air bit sharp against our faces, but her excitement kept us moving quickly toward the front porch, adorned with wreaths and twinkling lights. My dad answered the door promptly, but instead of the usual greeting, his expression hardened as he took in all three of us on the step. He stepped forward slightly, pulling the door mostly closed behind him, and spoke in that flat tone I'd heard too often. "We don't want Nathan and Ava coming in tonight. They just don't fit with how things are here." The statement landed heavy in the frozen air, cutting deeper than the wind. Ava stopped mid-step beside me, her bag slipping lower, as confusion turned to hurt in her wide eyes, tears welling up before she could stop them. Clear's throat, I felt a rush of protectiveness surge through me, hot against the cold, as Nathan stood frozen with the dishes in his arms. Without raising my voice, I met my dad's gaze and said, "Then we're not coming either." I turned immediately, wrapping an arm around Ava's shoulders as she started to cry softly, guiding her back down the salted path while Nathan followed without a word. The snow crunched under our boots, muffling everything except her small sobs that broke my heart more than any argument could. We loaded back into the car in silence, at first engine running to warm the interior as flurries danced in the headlights. Once home safe in our garage with the door sealing out the night, I pulled up the banking app on my phone and closed the joint account without second-guessing, fingers steady despite the adrenaline. The confirmation felt like closing a chapter I'd left open too long. A clear boundary finally set. Nathan started a fire in the living room while I helped Ava change into pajamas, her tears slowing as he promised hot chocolate with piles of marshmallows and her favorite movie. We curled up on the couch together, blankets piled high, the glow from the screen and flames casting soft light as he held us close. He added extra whipped cream to her mug, making silly faces until she managed a small laugh, then tucked her between us, where she eventually fell asleep, exhausted, but safe. In those quiet hours, with Nathan's arm around my shoulders, and the storm outside fading, the sting from earlier began to ease into something stronger, a determination to nurture only the love that lifted us up. The messages started pouring in just before midnight on Christmas Eve. My phone vibrated on the coffee table while the movie credits rolled and Ava slept soundly between Nathan and me. The first text was from my mom, short and sharp. "How could you ruin the holiday like this and leave us hanging?" I stared at the screen, the glow harsh in the dim living room, feeling the familiar pull to explain or smooth things over. Before I could decide, another came. "Your dad is upset. Everyone is asking where you went." Then my dad called and I let it ring out to voicemail, but he left one anyway. His voice tight, saying we'd embarrass the family by walking away over something so small, and that I needed to think about how my choices affected everyone else. The words echoed the old patterns, making me feel like the problem child again, even though I knew better now. Valerie texted next a long paragraph about how selfish it was to make the night about me when the kids were excited, ending with a jab. That more food for the rest of us wasn't the point. Her messages kept coming in quick succession, mixing guilt about ruining traditions with questions about whether I'd at least drop off the casserole I'd brought. Reading them, I felt the anger rise fresh, mixed with sadness for the relationship that had never quite been what I hoped. By morning, the tone shifted. My mom sent a casual check-in asking if we were okay, then slipped in a question about a bill she'd been expecting help with soon. My dad followed up with a voicemail mentioning truck repairs coming up and how tight things were getting. Valerie called twice, leaving voicemails that started sympathetic about Ava being upset, but quickly turned to reminding me how much they'd counted on the usual holiday contribution toward gifts for her kids. The pivot to money hit hardest, confirming what I'd feared, that the real concern wasn't our absence or AA's feelings, but the disruption to their expectations. I took a deep breath on the porch while Nathan made breakfast, deciding this time would be different. I typed one response to the group thread, keeping it short and steady. I've closed the joint account. I'm no longer funding a family that treats my husband and daughter this way, and I won't bring Ava around people who make her feel unwelcome. That's my boundary. The replies came fast. Shock from my mom. Accusations from Valerie about choosing sides, a longer message from my dad about gratitude and everything they'd done over the years. I read them once, heart pounding, but resolved, then muted the entire conversation, and turned off notifications. No more explanations, no debating. The line was drawn, and for the first time it felt like freedom rather than loss. The days that followed brought a quiet I hadn't expected. No buzzing phone pulling me into drama. No planning how to respond. Nathan and I focused on small routines with Ava. Sledding when fresh snow fell, baking the cookies we'd saved for ourselves, watching her face light up without the weight of comparison. The house felt lighter, conversations easier, as if we'd reclaimed space that had been occupied too long. Deborah called the morning after Christmas, her voice gentle as she asked how Ava was holding up and if we were all right. She didn't pry for details, just listened when I shared a little, then invited us over the following weekend for a relaxed dinner with their little tree still up, promising games and leftovers to make up for what we'd missed. Arriving there felt like breathing fresh air. Hugs at the door. Ava running straight to Gregory for a story. Deborah pulling out board games and hot cider without any underlying tension. We laughed through the evening, opened a few delayed gifts, and drove home with Ava asleep in the back, her new book from Deborah clutched tight. In that simple gathering, the contrast sharpened. Real care didn't come with conditions or comparisons. It just showed up steady and kind. 3 months later, on a spring morning, when the snow in Detroit had finally melted and trees were starting to bud, everything changed in a big way. A letter arrived from a lawyer's office we'd never heard of, informing Nathan that his late uncle, a quiet bachelor who'd run a small but successful manufacturing business, had left him the bulk of his estate. We sat at the kitchen table reading it together, Ava coloring nearby, hardly believing the numbers as they sank in. After taxes and fees, it came to about $800,000, a sum that felt life-altering for a family like ours used to careful budgeting and steady but modest paychecks. Nathan and I talked it through over several evenings after Ava went to bed, weighing options like paying off the house or investing safely. But the idea of a fresh start kept coming up. Somewhere warmer with space for Ava to grow and room for us to breathe away from old tensions. We started looking online at properties in southern Florida, drawn to the idea of mornings by the ocean and evenings without scraping ice off windshields. Before long, we narrowed it down to a few beachfront homes in quieter areas, places with enough bedrooms for guests and yards big enough for Ava to run freely. The process moved faster than we'd expected once we got serious. We booked a quick flight down to tour the top choices, leaving Ava with Deborah and Gregory for a long weekend while we walked through sunlit houses with realtors imagining barbecues on decks and Ava building sand castles just steps away. One property stood out, a 4-bedroom with wide windows facing the Gulf of Pool and direct beach access, and we made an offer that got accepted almost immediately. Signing the papers felt surreal, committing to this new chapter with a mix of excitement and nerves about uprooting everything familiar. Back in Detroit, we packed what we'd take ourselves and arranged movers for the rest, loading our SUV with essentials for the drive south. Once closing wrapped up in early summer, the road trip became a family adventure. Stopping at roadside spots Ava picked from the map, singing along to playlists and watching the landscape shift from gray highways to palm-lined coasts. Deborah and Gregory insisted on joining us for the final walkthrough before closing, booking their own flights to meet us there and share the moment. They arrived full of energy, touring the empty house with us and immediately picturing where furniture would go. Deborah walked straight to the upstairs bedrooms, declaring one with the best ocean view perfect for Ava and suggesting soft blues for the walls to match the water. Gregory measured spaces for a swing set in the yard, already planning visits to help install it. Over lunch at a nearby cafe, they handed us an envelope with a check for $100,000, calling it a housewarming gift to help with whatever we needed. Furniture renovations or just easing the transition. No strings attached, just their way of celebrating our new beginning. Their generosity hit me hard in the best way, a reminder of support that came freely because they wanted us happy, not because they expected anything back. Standing on the deck that first evening as a family watching waves roll in while Ava chased seashells on the sand below, I felt the weight of past hurts lifting. This wasn't just a bigger house. It was space to grow without old judgments. A place where Ava could invite friends without worry and where Nathan and I could build traditions rooted in joy instead of obligation. The future stretched out bright and open, full of possibilities we'd earned through hard choices and unexpected grace. The housewarming party took place on a warm summer afternoon by the beach in Florida. We had planned it casually, but word spread among Nathan's extended family and our new neighbors, turning into a lively gathering with tables on the deck, music drifting from speakers, and the smell of barbecue filling the air. Relatives arrived with side dishes and bottles of wine, kids running straight to the sand while adults caught up under umbrellas. Ava darted between groups in her sundress, showing off her new room to cousins she'd met at previous visits, her laughter carrying over the waves. Deborah and Gregory were at the heart of it all, greeting everyone with hugs and stories about how proud they were of the home we'd chosen. Deborah kept pulling Ava, eager to introduce her to aunts and uncles as their beloved granddaughter, watching with shining eyes as she led tours of the yard. Gregory played host, effortlessly flipping burgers and sharing jokes that had people gathered around him, making sure I felt included by bringing me into conversations and refilling my drink before I noticed it empty. Their ease turned the day into something effortless and joyful. The kind of celebration that felt genuinely shared. I had made the deliberate choice not to invite my parents or Valerie. No dramatic announcement, just silence on that front, knowing any outreach would bring conditions or criticism we no longer had space for. They found out anyway, the way people do these days. Photos from the party went up on social media. Ava splashing in the pool. Nathan and Gregory manning the grill, group shots on the beach at sunset. Valerie called that evening, her voice sharp through the speaker as I stepped inside for a moment of quiet. She went on about how unfair it was to exclude family from such a big moment, how my parents were hurt seeing pictures of a celebration they weren't part of, and how money had clearly changed things. The accusations felt familiar but distant now, like echoes from a life that no longer fit. I listened long enough to be sure, then told her calmly that we'd moved on, and wished them well before ending the call and blocking the numbers completely. No anger in the moment, just a clean closure that protected the peace we'd built. In the months that followed, the consequences became clear on their side. My parents had to adjust to tighter budgets without the regular help they'd grown used to, cutting back on extras and eating out less. Valerie switched her kids to public school to save on tuition and took on more evening shifts herself for childcare, things she'd avoided when assistance was reliable. The biggest loss, though, was the connection to Ava. No more casual visits or holiday cards. A granddaughter growing up without their presence because the door stayed closed. These days our life feels full in ways I once only hoped for. Mornings start with coffee on the deck, watching the ocean. Ava building sand castles or reading in her room with the big windows. Nathan comes home from work to evenings of dinner together and walks along the shore. Simple routines that ground us. Deborah and Gregory visit, often filling the house with their easy affection. Weekend barbecues, movie nights, or just dropping by to see what Ava's latest project is. There's no tension underneath, no unspoken expectations, just acceptance that lets us all breathe freely. Looking back, the real lesson wasn't in the money or the house, but an understanding that family isn't defined by blood alone. It's built on respect, kindness, and showing up without keeping score. Choosing to protect our peace meant letting go of what hurt us, and in its place, we gained something stronger and truer. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If this story resonated with you, the pain of boundaries or the joy of chosen family, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in my place? Share below. Your stories matter, too.